Hey, it is cold here where I am, and it's completely my fault because when we had a gray November and a gray December and a gray January, I kept saying, if it's going to be cold, I just wish it would snow so it would look pretty. So now it's pretty, it's blinding, it's bright, and it's like up to our waists pretty much here in Michigan. I don't know what it's like where you are from, but I apologize for the snow because it's totally my fault. I did it. We are here today for this episode of the Healthy Parenting Connector, where we at Kids Cook Real Food connect you with the experts who have the information you need to raise healthy children. And today, the expert is me. I've got 4 kids, and that's a total of over 34 kid years of parenting. Okay, meaning if you add up all my kids' ages, I've got experience for 34 kid years, 4 different personalities, had plenty of failure along the way, and I guess I can slap that title tentatively expert on myself. We have 4 amazing kids. And so I invite you today to learn from our successes and our failures. And we're going to talk about 3 vital strategies to raising successful children. Of course, at Kids Cook Real Food, our mission is to save the health of the young generation, to get kids in the kitchen, cooking, connecting with their families, building their confidence, and finding their creativity around food, healthy food. But anything that I can do to help parents keep, better habits and just kind of build a better household culture will help their kids' health overall, right? So these 3 vital strategies can 100% be applied in the kitchen, but they can 110% also apply to all of life with parents and children and the hard job of parenting. It is not easy. No one ever said it would be easy. And it's definitely not. So if you're on live or if you're coming in live, feel free to ask questions as I go. Otherwise, if you ask questions later, I can come back, and I can answer those, such as Facebook. So the 3 strategies we are talking about today is having high expectations for your kids. And we have to talk about the difference between high expectations and a high achieving mindset. Very important. Number 2 is consistency. Once you've chosen a path, be consistent, although not to the point of being ridiculous in case you are wrong. Another fine balance that parents need to reach. And number 3 is repetition. Okay, we don't ever learn anything if we just do it once. So how can we incorporate repetition in life into our household culture? Okay, so let's dive right in. First of all, number 1, we want to have high expectations for our kids, because if we do not raise the bar of where we think they can be, most kids will never reach higher than we expect. So it's really important to let our kids know that we think they're amazing, fabulous human beings and they have almost unlimited potential. Not unlimited potential. Kids can't do anything. Don't tell them they can do anything. That's why we have a bunch of people who are having trouble getting jobs, because they think they can do anything. They act like it and they can't. Okay, so again, it's another fine line. Your kids can't do anything, but they can do an awful lot. They can do a lot more than we expect of them sometimes. So some examples of high expectations. Well, wait, first, I don't want to go into examples. First, we have to talk about the high achieving mindset, because last summer I read the book, The Gift of Failure, reminding parents to allow their kids to fail, that creating a good life for our kids is not letting it be easy and doing everything for them and never having them be hurt by failure. We actually want them to feel the pain of failure. That is a better life than thinking that you can never fail, or than going into adulthood without the knowledge of how to deal with failure and conflict and not everything going right all the time. Okay, that's a skill that we need to teach our kids. So Jessica Lahey is the author of that awesome book, The Gift of Failure. I have an interview with her. It's fabulous. It will be airing probably like May or June, because we're pretty stacked up here, but definitely watch for that one. She is great. She has a great mindset on life and parenting and teaching, and I know you'll learn a lot from her. So in the meantime, grab that book, The Gift of Failure. Very, very key. What I would call a great companion book is the one I'm in the middle of right now by Julie Lythcott-Hames. It's called How to Raise an Adult. And Julie was a freshman dean at Stanford for 10 years, and she watched kids come in as freshmen more and more with their parents. Parents were continuing to not only parent, but like hover parent into college and even into the workforce. And this has had devastating consequences on our young adults and their ability to, cope, but basically just live their life and be adults and not children in great big huge bodies. So How to Raise an Adult, amazing book, but she talks a lot about how since like the 80s and 90s and on, we've had a very high achievement mindset where we have to do more, get more on our resume, basically like list things out so that we can get our kids into a good college. That is not at all what I mean when I say high expectations. So when I say high expectations, it's not piling up the activities and being the best gymnast, the best cheerleader, the best dancer, the best National Honor Society, the best kid in youth group, the best person doing service projects, the highest grades. That is not what I'm talking about. Okay, that is not high expectations. That's unreasonable high achieving expectations. Okay, high expectations don't always have to take more time. All of those things that I listed take more time, and our kids only have a certain amount of time in the day, and we don't want to push them to poor eating habits, poor sleeping habits, and high stress habits. Make sense? Okay, so high expectations are allowing kids to understand that we're going to give them some space in which to figure out where their talents and skills and qualities lie. Okay, we're not going to script that for them, but we're going to let them know that we really do believe that they can do an awful lot. Some examples of high expectations that don't take time are, at a certain age, we let our kids be out in the neighborhood until 5:30 p.m. without telling us where they are. Okay, not at age 5, but somewhere between, 7 and 10, depending on that child's personality and maturity, we officially give them that opportunity where we say, from now on, right now, like this is a big day, you don't have to necessarily tell us which friend's house you're at. That's huge. That gives kids a big responsibility, and it doesn't take extra time. It's not adding to a list. It's not filling up a schedule or a calendar. Okay, speaking of calendars, allowing your kids to begin to manage their own calendar and their own schedule is a huge way to have high expectations and yet not, again, be stressing them out and keeping them up too late and encouraging bad stress and coping habits. Okay, so that's what we're doing with our middle schooler right now, is we're trying to help him learn how to keep his own calendar through lots and lots of failure, I might add. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to take it back. That doesn't mean that I'm just going to manage his calendar until he's 18 and then send him off to college to experience all that failure when it matters. Like, let's let him fail in middle school. But the point is, I know he can do it, so I'm going to keep that bar high. Does that make sense? It doesn't take more time. But yet it's a high expectation. A high expectation example around food is that we expect our kids to eat regular, normal food and not just kid food. Okay, serving your kids chicken nuggets and frozen pizzas and mac and cheese while the adults eat a separate meal is super, super lowering that bar on expectations. You're telling your kids, yeah, you're a kid, you eat kid food. They're not going to bust out of that without you. So I challenge parents all the time to raise your expectations on what your kids can eat. No, they don't have to eat everything. And yes, their taste buds are more sensitive than ours. They have more taste buds as kids than adults, but that doesn't mean that we should feed them junk and feed them kid food. So we got to keep our expectations up, even if they're not quite reaching it, right? We always put a bite of everything on everyone's plates and expect them to take a bite because we want to teach them that is where we're headed, right? Everyone in the world can have a wide palate by the time they're adults. And if we don't start stretching that ability or stretching that expectation when they're kids, when are we going to do it? Like suddenly when they're 16, oh, by the way, like we're done with chicken nuggets and pizza, you're eating everything now. It's not how it works. We've got to keep the expectation high, even if it's many, many, many steps from where they are to where we want them to be. So anyway, those are just a couple examples. High expectations are often about letting kids make their own decisions, letting kids try and fail. Letting kids understand that we do expect a lot of them. We don't expect them to do the best in everything, to be the best. I got to articulate that. We don't expect them to be the best in everything they do, but we expect them to do their best in everything they do. It sounds very similar, but it's on opposite sides of a huge chasm, isn't it? If we expect them to be the best, we may be pushing them beyond their limitations, and that's a huge stressor. If we expect them to do their best, well, that's certainly within what they can handle because it's their personal best. But there's also a big, kind of psychological, philosophical conversation there about what is your best. And that's where we can teach kids how high expectations work and don't cripple. Okay, so high expectations is strategy number one for raising successful children. If we've got to continually raise our bar or just keep our bar high and help them climb up to where we know that they can be. We find in our Kids Cook Real Food e-course that a lot of parents are surprised by what their kids can do, okay? And this is because, you know, you just go along in life and it's hard to remember sometimes that your 4-year-old can do so much more than your 2-year-old and your 6-year-old can do so much more than your 4-year-old. You know what I mean? Like we get in ruts and we forget to raise the bar a little bit. So one of the things I love about when people become a member of the Kids Cook Real Food e-course is that it suddenly challenges them to raise the bar because they've got these videos and they've got these skills laid out. And all of a sudden they're finding that their kids can do so much more than they used to expect. Okay, and I just want to read a couple little notes from people. One mom said, I was reluctant to let my kids in the kitchen, right? I know a lot of you feel that way, but now my 6 and 8-year-olds can regularly make lunches for everyone and have saved dinner on multiple occasions by cutting down on food prep. So I love that. I love when parents are surprised that their expectations are blown away. Rachel from Arizona says, I haven't had them do much helping in the kitchen until now because it's quicker and easier to do it myself, right? Again, I know a lot of you have said that or thought it. I realize now, however, Rachel says that they are much more capable than I was giving them credit for. Love it. And my life is going to be a million times easier when they are peeling and chopping their own veggie snacks. Okay, so that's part of a really long note that Rachel sent me. And there's all sorts of details about how nervous she was and how her kids like far exceeded what she thought they could do. So again, that's kind of my challenge for us as parents, is to stretch our own brain a little bit, to raise our own expectations for our kids. And if they don't reach it, it's okay. Like we just need to give them a wide pasture within which to play, right? We put up the fence, but we've got to put up the fence wider than we think they can handle. And then we see what happens. And they won't always reach it. That's why it's not a high achievement expectation. It's okay if your kids don't reach your expectations today, tomorrow, or next year, but they need to know that there's a whole world out there in which they can continue to excel and continue to improve. All right, one last little note from a reader. This one's so cute. My 5-year-old wanted a PB&J for lunch, and she was about to like reluctantly stop what she was doing and make it for him. And then she remembered, oh, he learned this skill in Kids Cook Real Food. She said, actually, you can make it yourself because you learned spreading in your class. Son was delighted. She just got out the materials and he went to work and he was so happy that he could do it. He could not wait to tell his kindergarten teacher that he made his own sandwich for lunch. She ends by saying, thanks for empowering my kid, which again, I'm happy to be on your team to empower your kid, but most of all, I want to encourage you to empower your own kids, right? To raise that expectation, not high achieving, but high expectations, give them wider boundaries in which they can make their own decisions, make their own mistakes, and figure out kind of where their capabilities really can vault up to. But if we keep our expectation down here, they'll never go above it. Okay, so 3 vital strategies for raising successful children in life, but also applying to the kitchen. Number 1 is high expectations. Number 2 is consistency. Okay, I know this is like, it's kind of a no-brainer in parenting. All the parenting books and classes say be consistent. But I have an extra reason for you, for your own brain, why being consistent is really, really important. And hopefully it will help you be more motivated to be consistent. Okay, so what happens when we are inconsistent? For example, we have a rule in our house about no devices being in bedrooms. And that rule kind of got pushed, as kids will do, and suddenly I'm noticing devices in bedrooms and kind of like, I was like, wait a second, what was our rule? You know what I mean? Like that's where you have to know the rule to be consistent. And then devices were being plugged in bedrooms, and that's really a no-no in my book because who knows, hope maybe EMFs will kill us. And if they will, I want the devices at least out of the bedrooms at night, right? And so I had to like redirect and react. But it was stressful in that space between consistency. At some point I was like, hey, wait a minute. We're not supposed to have devices in bedrooms. Get them all out. Here's what's going to happen when you have devices in your bedrooms. Here's the consequence. And I'm going to be 100% consistent from now on. But in that space when I was like, wait a minute, what's going on? I think I'm getting played here. That doesn't feel good. That stresses out my brain because I'm trying to redecide every single day what my policy actually should be. Okay, if we set a policy, Boom. The policy is A. If we're constantly refiguring and deciding like maybe the policy should be B or maybe it should be C, that takes our brain power. Moms and dads, you have a finite number of decisions that you can make throughout the day. You have a finite amount of willpower that you can use throughout your day. And if you are constantly remaking decisions on parenting and procedures and consequences, you are wasting your own decision-making power. And that's why you get so tired out by the end of the day. So it's not only important for your kids to know that you'll be consistent, but it's actually a gift to your own brain, because if you can make a decision once on January 28th, what you will do in a certain situation, you should never have to make that decision again if you also decide to be consistent. And therefore, every time that situation comes up, it's like, oh, you reach into your brain, you get the answer, you spit it out. There's no decision-making power or willpower used up, okay? Your kids will take a lot of your decision-making power and willpower throughout their lives. Don't let them take more than they need. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's your reason. That's your like personal heart reason, is there's no reason for you to have to continue to reuse your brain power to make decisions that should be made once. Okay, so that's the parent reason why we should be consistent. Obviously, the kid reason is kids have to know that we will do what we say, or else they'll continue to push, and when they realize that they have more control, well, we've lost control, and now we're unable to help them in all the ways we should be able to help them become better people, and just know like that decisions are consistent. So anyway, it's very obvious why consistency is important for kids, but it's very hard to do. And so I'm hoping that knowing a little bit of brain science about decision-making power and willpower will help you remember like, oh, like, no, I really do need to be consistent. If I say, an hour of screen time at a time, that's the same all the time, right? I should not be constantly refiguring that. If we have bedtime is 9 o'clock or bedtime is 8 o'clock or whatever bedtime is, you should only have to refigure that about once a year when your child becomes a different age, right? That's not, there are lots and lots of non-negotiables. Now, I said at the top of the spot here that we do want to make sure that we're not being so consistent that we're not realizing if we make a bad decision, right? So if we really have made a bad policy in our house that's not serving our children or not serving our families, we have to be humble enough to back up and say, ooh, kids, like, okay, here's what mom said. Here's what I've learned since then, or here's what I've seen happen because of it, and it actually wasn't the best decision. Here's what I'm going to say now, okay? But now you can be consistent on decision number 2. So it's not like you're constantly every day figuring out what should be done. You stay consistent until you realize that the policy is not serving your family, and then, be humble enough to change it. Because policies, that you've set in 2014 might not be the best policies in 2019. So it's not that you'll never use decision-making power, but it should not be used on a daily basis for policies within your household. And if you can't remember what they are, Katie raises her hand, because sometimes I'm like, what did I say about that? What was the consequence going to be? Maybe you and I both should write them down on a piece of paper, stuck to a bulletin board or stuck to our fridge somewhere, so that we can actually just go look, right? Or a note in your phone or whatever. As long as you can remember where that is, you're good to go. But it's really, really important, again, for kids to have consistency and for your own brain to have consistency. That will reduce your stress, and it will actually reduce their stress, because it's stressful for kids to not know where those boundaries are on the pasture that they're running around in. If they think they might be able to push those boundaries, they're going to continue to push. And when they don't know where they end, it's very stressful for them, and it feels unsafe. And the primary purpose of your brain, you guys, I'm halfway through my certification as a stress mastery educator now, and I'm so excited, and I love learning about the brain. Primary purpose of the brain is to make sure you're safe. And for kids, part of being safe is knowing that someone's going to stop them if they're about to do something unsafe, right? And that's our job. Our kids have to know where those boundaries are. And if the boundaries feel shifty in some areas, if they feel shifty on screens in bedrooms, and they feel shifty on bedtimes, and they feel shifty on what they're supposed to eat or what they're supposed to do, they're not sure if they're solid or shifty in other places. Shifty is not a very good word. Anyway, my vocabulary might not be the best right now. It's a snow day. Kids are home, so morning didn't go as I thought it would. But for the health of our kids, for their stress levels, we've got to have consistent boundaries. And again, high expectations, a little bit wider than they necessarily need at that very moment, but not so wide that you can't see them. not so flexible that the kids will never know when mom's going to step in. Okay, that's stressful for them and it's stressful for you, and nobody needs that. Number 3, vital strategy for raising successful children, and by the way, successful is defined however you want it to be. Okay, I hope you're not defining a successful child as one who gets into a great college, because if you are, you might be stressing yourself and your child out too much. A successful child, I'm hoping for you, is someone who's kind and generous and faithful and independent and has life skills and knows how to make good decisions and does their best in everything. If you raise a child like that, no matter what college they get into, they're going to be just fine. They're going to be just fine in their lives, and they're going to choose a wonderful spouse and have wonderful children if that's God's plan for them. And if it's not, they'll still be able to make a positive impact on the world regardless of what their paycheck is. Does that make sense? So that's my goal for my kids, is all those things: kind, generous, faithful, independent, responsible, good decision maker. If I can do that for them, it doesn't really matter what their achievement is in school, in these artificially constructed systems of grades. Okay, so a little sidebar there. Sorry. 3 vital strategies to raise successful children, whatever that means to you. 1 is high expectations, different than high achievement. 2 is being consistent. And number 3 is repetition. And I don't know that this one is talked about quite as much in all the parenting books, but as someone who teaches kids to cook particularly, I see the value of repetition over and over and over. We don't learn, we as human beings, adults or children, don't learn in a one-off situation. You can't completely learn something well if you just do it once, okay? And you know that. If you think of any skill you've had, you were probably kind of poor at it the first time you tried it. The more you practice, the better you got. Like, that's just how things work. So we want to think, in whatever goals we have for our kids, are we giving them opportunities for repetition? So if it's learning calendar skills, are we continually checking in with them, letting them fail, pulling them back to understanding how they failed and how they can do better in the future? If they're trying to learn an instrument, obviously they have to practice. If they're trying to learn a sport, they need to practice. But if they're trying to learn how to be kind, they need to practice too, right? Which is why we don't step in every time when kids are fighting, whether it's siblings or friends. If we step in and separate them, how are they going to learn in the future how to handle those situations of conflict? So we can actually rejoice when our kids are fighting. I'm speaking to myself 100% here. We can rejoice when our kids are fighting with each other or with friends, because it gives them another opportunity to practice dealing with conflict, which will never leave their lives, and another opportunity to practice being the person who can diffuse the situation and figure out how to deal with their own stress and start to let that go and forgive, right? So repetition in all of our lives. We have learned this the hard way. A couple of years ago, my husband and I and my oldest son were certified scuba diving, okay, which is, by the way, the most terrifying thing and the hardest thing I've ever done, physically, psychologically, emotionally, you name it. Super, super hard. We had to do maybe 15 hours of classes with video at home, and then about 40 hours in a week of in the pool, in the ocean work. So hard. By the end, we felt so incredibly accomplished, and we knew we needed to try to scuba dive again anytime we could, so that we didn't lose our skill and lose our certification. So 4 months later, we got another opportunity to scuba dive, and we signed up, we got ready, and we talked through with my son some of the skills. There's a 5-step process for how you descend, and there's a 5-step process for how you go up. But we didn't go through everything. And a crisis sort of happened while we were down there. First of all, we were with a guide. So none of us had a computer on our wrist to know how deep we were. And if you know anything about scuba, once you get to a certain depth, you can't just shoot up to the top, because you'll get the bends and you have to go to a hospital. And it's a really, really serious thing. You have to come up really slowly. I think it's 1 foot per second. And at all of a sudden, at a certain point, again, my husband, my oldest son, and I, all of a sudden I see my husband shoot up to the top, so fast. And I was like, oh my gosh, what just happened? The female brain is just going all the terrible things that might happen. I think we got the guide's attention. And then my son starts to follow him, starts kicking his flippers up. And I'm like, so I'm stuck in this, and I tried to grab his flipper. Because of course, the worst part for a female, I think, about scuba diving is that you can't talk. you can't fix situations with your words. And so like, it's horrible. I couldn't yell after him, stop. So I tried to grab his flipper. I missed, and I had a second to make a decision. Do I try to follow him in the chance that maybe I can pull him back down, and then maybe all three of us have the bends and are in the hospital? Or do I just stay down like I know I'm supposed to? So I stayed down because if I couldn't catch him, I couldn't catch him, you know? I stayed down, and you guys, I was like panicking. I was sucking air so badly. And like, you know, you're supposed to like, in scuba, you're supposed to breathe really evenly. And that was like actually one of my best skills in scuba, is that I could breathe super slowly. And I always had a lot of air left. My husband was always the one who sucked too much air and made us turn around, because like when the first person's halfway out, that's when you got to turn. Whew, I couldn't help it. I mean, all I could do was just pray and hope. Like I was completely out of control, hyperventilating pretty much under the water, sucked so much air. Luckily, we were not deep enough. Okay, everyone was okay. We weren't deep enough. But afterward, like the weight on my shoulders of the fact that we took my son down and didn't go over all the rules, we didn't do all the repetition, I was like, dang, you know, we messed up. We really needed to go through like some of the most important safety rules. And, you know, we hadn't done it for 4 months. So people forget. He was good. Like, he's really smart. He's really good at rules, but he forgot that he shouldn't follow. And I think I can see that applying to many parts of life. I never want you to be the mom who's watching your kid go off into the world as an adult and like hyperventilating because you didn't practice basic life skills, like how to cook for yourself and what you should eat and how you treat other people and how you are responsible with your time. You know what I'm saying, right? Because like at some point we're going to be that person who can't follow our kid and catch his flipper anymore, right? And so we don't want to be the person who's constantly following them and pulling them back. We have to be the person who gives them enough repetition that the skills we want them to have in life are just part of their lives and are completely, you know, habit. That's how you build habit, is by repetition. So if you're teaching your kids to cook, great. Start it, use our videos, teach them to cook, but make sure that you're giving them opportunities at least once a week to practice those skills. Otherwise, they have to like relearn it every time. They have to relearn it every time. Then like all the learning you've already done starts to diminish in its importance. So in order to, you know, if you're taking time to teach your kids things, you want to maximize that time, give them repetition. And that will ensure that that time that you've spent teaching them has worth and has value. So repetition, very important. And this is in everything. Calendar skills, being kind, dealing with conflict, scuba diving, using sharp knives, cooking at the stove. What are other life skills we need? I mean, just remembering to take everything with you, right? All of these things, we want to make sure that we as parents aren't doing them for our kids, but that we're talking our kids through the processes of remembering in their own brain how to do these things, okay? So as a mom and a kids cooking teacher, from me to you, with my 34 years of kid years experience parenting, this is what I've kind of distilled down to the 3 most vital strategies that all parents need for every habit that they want to instill in their kids. Number 1 is high expectations. Be sure to raise that bar. Be sure to let your kids know that you believe they really can do maybe a little more than you think they can do. Okay, but not high achievement, not expecting them to be the best, but expecting them to do their best. Number 2 is consistency. Once you make a policy, be consistent at it. That will not only give your own brain and stress level a break, but it also lets your kids know that they can trust you and that they're safe and that they have boundaries, and they will push for a little while and then they can stop and like use their brain energy for something else that's much more effective for their personal growth than pushing their boundaries. Number 3 is repetition. Anything you want your kids to do, make sure you're consistently building in opportunities for them to do that, right? If we teach our kids to tie their shoes and then we give them Velcro shoes, they're going to forget how to tie. And again, raising my hand, because I've done that too. If we teach our kids to use a sharp knife or to saute at the stove or to put something in an oven and we don't give them another chance to practice that for 3 or 4 or 5 months, they're going to forget and we have to start over. So consistent repetition of skills and of habits that you want for your kids. If you have to put it in your calendar, do it. Have your phone pop up and say, have your kids cooked this week? Okay? Or have you reminded your children about healthy habits this week? Whatever you want them to learn, figure out how you can remind them instead of doing it for them. Raise those expectations, be consistent, and you have lots of opportunities for repetition built into your week. I'm Katie Kimball, founder of the Kids Cook Real Food e-course. We are here to help you vault your kids into healthy eating by connecting with them around healthy food, building their confidence in the kitchen, and helping them discover their own creativity with food, and in so doing have more ownership of healthy eating. That's what I'm here for. And I'm also proud to host the Healthy Parenting Connector, where we connect parents who want to raise healthy kids with experts like me and many others who have the information they need. Thank you very much, and we will be back next week with another episode of the Healthy Parenting Connector. Have a good day, and if you are in the Midwest, y'all, stay warm, stay inside.